us today, we have Mr. Jason Puryear. He is the director of the College Place in Alexandria, Virginia. Welcome, Jason.
Yeah. Oh, I had frozen for a moment because I was waiting for the interpretation, but we're not doing that this evening. So I will share my slides and get started. Yeah. Oh, I need to get approval to share.
You should be good.
So again, this session is an opportunity to review financial aid award letters. And if you have not received them yet, hopefully you will be receiving those letters in the next week or so. So if you're still waiting on a few from a handful of colleges and universities, don't panic because you don't have them yet. It's normal for award letters to be released over the course of the month of March. On different cadences depending on the institution, to be honest. So that still gives some time before you have to respond by May 1st. So first, I want to take an opportunity to congratulate you on being accepted to the colleges and universities that you've been admitted into. As you have found out over the course of your senior year, the college admissions process can be a very competitive and nerve-wracking process. So I'm glad that you made it to this point. Hopefully, if you're seeing this presentation, you haven't already committed because you are coming to this presentation and we're going to walk through and talk through how to look through the financial aid process. But even if you have, I hope you can take something away from the conversation we'll have this evening about things to look for and questions to ask as you work through the process of understanding what financial aid is being offered to you and what things will look like next year once you begin your freshman year of college, or for parents once you send your son or daughter off away to college, and what that bill will look like at the end of that academic year. So I want to review something. As I go through, I'll review as we work through each of these slides. And I also want to remind you, as you're receiving your grants and scholarships, there'll be more information to plug this more formally at the end of this presentation, but I want to take a moment to remind you to share this information out, especially with your college and career counselors. They want to know the good news that you have in this process in terms of where you've not only been offered admission into, but what kinds of grants and scholarships you've been given to help you afford your education at those institutions. So remember to share that information out as you receive it. So in terms of financial aid, you will receive money likely from all of these pockets, maybe from 3 out of 4 of these categories. So as you're working through the process of understanding your financial aid, it's important for us to level set at the beginning of this conversation. And just want to share, grants typically come from either the federal or the state government. If you're going to a public college in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you may see both in your financial aid award letter. Those dollars, as long as you use them for educational expenses, which for most college students are every expense they have on a day-by-day basis, but then that's always free money. So you don't have to worry about paying any grant back. There are exceptions if you don't meet specific GPA requirements for some grants, so pay attention to those requirements for the grants that are awarded to you. Or if you don't spend those funds on educational expenses, those dollars could be pulled back. But in the grand scheme of things, grants, for the most part, free money, don't cost you anything. You don't ever have to worry about paying them back, except for those few exceptions that I mentioned earlier. Scholarships on the same page are free money that you can use, and as long as you're using those scholarship dollars for educational expenses, those are free dollars you never have to pay back. Hopefully, you haven't paid anybody to get you access to free dollars through scholarships to help you pay for college. Scholarships can come from a variety of sources. You may see on your financial aid award letter that there are scholarships coming from the institution that you're enrolling into. Maybe it's a presidential or an honor scholarship, or a scholarship tied to the major that you're choosing to enroll in. You may see some grants that are also tied to your major, depending on the institution or the discipline that you're going into. But between those two categories, again, free money, Don't have to worry about paying it back. If you're offered work study, either federal or institutional, those are dollars that are not given to you at the beginning of the semester. You have to get a job. It's typically, and these jobs typically are on campus, but you'll clock the hours and you had to be paid legally at least once a month. But typically, for most work study positions, you're paid biweekly or every 2 weeks, depending on the institution's pay structure. But you had to clock those hours in order to receive the money that's being highlighted through work study funds that are made available to you. And then last but not least are loans. If you've been to any of my presentations about paying for college or the financial aid process, I'd like to share that loans are part of the process for most students that are going to into post-secondary education, especially if you're going into a four-year college or university. That's just the reality for most students. If you're in a situation where you're able to fully fund your education through grants and scholarships, that's awesome. Congratulations. But just know that for most students in the audience, for most parents, loans are a part of this conversation as well. And those funds are borrowed. You do have to pay them back at the end of the day as well. From there are some costs that will be billed to you as you work through the financial aid process. Those are the direct costs. So if you are a freshman going into your first year of college and you're required to live on campus at that institution, your direct costs are tuition and fees, your housing, and maybe even your meal plan, depending on how your college packages all that together. So they will use any financial aid that you receive to pay for those direct costs first, and then any indirect costs that you have, whatever financial aid that has been awarded that is left over, you'll receive a disbursement, the student will, to help pay for those indirect costs. So those are books and supplies, personal expenses, shampoo, deodorant, transportation to and from campus if the student is going to the opposite end of the state. UVA is in part Southwest Virginia. There's a portion of their financial aid award letter that will cover the budget to provide transportation to and from home, typically mileage to cover gas and related expenses. If you're going to a college in Texas, you're probably not going to drive. You can, it's a long road trip, but realistically, you're probably taking a train or flying to and from that institution, and that transportation part of your budget will be reflected in those indirect costs. This is always where I like to remind parents that you will feel a little bit in the dark at this part of the financial aid process. Your students will be getting billed. Their bills are typically due sometime in August before freshman year begins. Some colleges may remind you as a parent that these due dates are coming up, but some may not. They may just send messaging directly to your student. It might not include you at all in the process. So if you as the parent are getting worried as you move into the summer and you get closer to August because you haven't heard anything, check in with your son or daughter because they probably either they haven't told you because they're worried, or they've been ignoring messages, or maybe they're working in the background finding scholarships to figure out how to cover the gap. But they know that the bill is coming due. And then once those direct costs are covered as a part of this process, the student typically is sent a direct deposit. And that direct deposit might be $1,000, might be $2,000, might be $5,000, depending on the institution and the cost of attendance. This is always where I like to share with students and parents. Especially if your son or daughter hasn't worked yet, so they're not used to a paycheck coming in, and maybe they're not used to having really, frankly, any money in a checking or savings account. When those checks are dispersed in August, that to help them prepare, one, to not spend that all at once, but two, understand that they need to budget that money to last over the course of 5 months. So August, September, October, November, December, until the financial aid disbursement happens in January to cover their indirect costs for the spring. But as you're working through this process, you'll see what financial aid is looking to cover. And every institution approaches this conversation a little bit differently, but on average, this is what sticker prices look like when you're comparing the general public institution and the general private institution on average across this country. So make sure you're paying attention to tuition and fees. If the student is a commuter, one way that students and parents can save money and help work down this cost of attendance is by, if the student is still living at home, and mom and dad, you're very graciously still going to house and feed them and not expect them to contribute towards those expenses. That can lower the cost of attendance for the student. So taking out, this 14,000 out of this 32. So then tuition and fees is one way to manage this process. But if you're not, that is a part of the cost of attendance. So please keep that in mind. I always, especially when I'm talking to teenagers who may have a very high metabolism, student athletes, young men that have really voracious appetites in terms of food. Sometimes families will look to try to save money in this budget by getting a meal plan that doesn't fit the student. If the student doesn't need a lot of food in terms of their intake, this is one way you can manage this cost of this process. But if your son or daughter is anything like me as a teenager, I needed 3 meals and some snacks during the course of a day. And we need to make sure our students are eating well enough so they can sleep well, so they can study well, so they can do well academically. But as an example here, the public university student will have total indirect costs of about 2,500. If there's financial aid left over after their total cost of attendance of 31,500, indirect cost is taken care of. The student would see a disbursement of 2,500 directly given to them. For a private institution, cost of attendance, tuition and fees is going to be higher on average. But housing and food, depending on if you're talking about the same city or similar geo market for the institutions, you'll see similar cost of attendance. The same thing holds true if the student is going to be commuting to and from their private institution. That's one way to save on housing and food if parents are able to still cover that for the student. But you'll see total direct cost is a lot higher for that student living on campus their freshman year at a private institution versus a public institution. Where books and personal expenses and transportation may be a little bit higher at the private institution. So then whatever financial aid is left after those direct costs are covered, the student would see the disbursement on that end. Be wary of making a decision before you see the financial aid that's being offered to you. I walk through the sticker price and what it might look like on the front end. And not necessarily to panic anybody that maybe has a fairly expensive private institution as your top choice. But I want you to understand the cost and where they're coming from in terms of direct and indirect cost. So that by the time you see your financial aid award letter, you can understand where the money needs to be to cover what expenses are in your own personal household budget. If the student's not commuting and they're living on campus, you'll need to have a plan for how to cover the total direct cost. If they're commuting and you're able to help as a household, that can help make some colleges more affordable than others. So know your cost of attendance. Personal to you. It may not be listed in your offer letter. I've already been talking a little bit about how to do the math that is very specific to your situation. If you're a commuter again, and your parents are able to help you cover your housing and meal costs for your freshman year, then subtract that out from your total cost of attendance and focus on that remaining number in terms of what your financial aid needs to cover. On the same note, maybe your college is a little bit further away and the transportation expenses that you've calculated are different than what's in your financial aid award letter. Sometimes you need to do a little bit of work on your end as a family to understand what that budget will look like for your household and why that might be a little different from one family to another. Some students may only come home during breaks in the semester or at the end of the semester. Some students, especially freshman year, may feel an urge to come home every weekend. What is feasible for your budget? You need to have that conversation now as you work through what is going to be offered to you through the financial aid process. Do pay attention to the loans that are being offered. There are essentially 3 different sets of loans that will be offered through financial aid. There are subsidized loans, which as long as the student is pursuing their degree at least half time, that interest is paid by the Department of Education on that student's behalf. So no interest will accrue until 6 months after graduation, at which point repayment begins on those loans. Unsubsidized loans are similar in that the student will receive it, but different than subsidized loans because unsub has interest that gets generated from the day that those funds are dispersed to the student to help them pay for the educational expenses. But like subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans are not due for payment until 6 months after graduation. There's also a Parent Plus loan that may be offered to help the family pay for the education. Parents, especially, be careful at this part of the process because a Parent Plus loan is being borrowed by a parent or adopted parent to help the student pay for college. And for a Parent Plus loan, that first payment's not due 6 months after the student graduates or 6 months after they stop out in terms of working towards their degree completion. Say your fall bill is due August 1st and you take out a Parent Plus loan to pay for that. Your first payment as a parent on that Parent Plus loan is going to be September 15th, October 1st, somewhere in that date range. So it happens really fast in this process. And it can catch some families off guard if you're not prepared for that payment. And I mentioned that one, so to reiterate a point that I made in prior presentations, if you've seen them, students, this is your cost of attendance to figure out how to navigate. If your parents are in a position where they can help borrow funds or maybe help you with a payment plan, that's great. One, tell them you love them, you appreciate them, and thank you for that help. But I also want you to understand how much you're going to owe on the front end, but instead of doing the math on the back end and having to make life decisions based on having borrowed more than you're comfortable. I want you to understand what you're looking at borrowing on the front end, both as an individual, as a student, and if your parents are helping you all together as a family. Look at your school's graduation and loan default rates. This is all public data that institutions are required to present to you in a myriad of ways as you work through this process. If you're not seeing this data right in front of you, reach out to undergraduate admissions or to the financial aid office, and they can provide you with this data. Use this to make a decision. If your school's average default rate 6 years out from graduation is that only 10% of students have defaulted, and 90% are graduating in 4 years and 85% find employment that allow their alumni to easily repay their loans. Sounds like a pretty good situation, no matter how much student loan debt you're getting into within reason. If your school's graduation rate is 60% and the student loan default rate is 80%, that's another scenario. You need to go into this process as an informed consumer before you make a decision about where you want to go in the fall. This is an example or a sample of what a financial aid offer may look like. On one side, or one part of it, you may see your cost of attendance for the 25-26 academic year that will outline tuition and fees. So what does it cost to be in the classroom? What is your housing and meal budget going to look like? So your direct costs here will be summarized. They'll give you a budget for your books and supplies. This budget is something you can control. If you're looking to save money here, don't go to your campus bookstore, buy online books. Think about book rentals, either physical copies or digital copies, and then a transportation budget. And then they'll include information about your financial aid package. One of the first things that pops out to me here is that the numbers don't match. I'm not seeing gift aid and net cost equal the cost of attendance. So the numbers are different here for the student. And I share that because sometimes as you're working this process, it is easy to hone in on, oh, this college is giving me a $23,000 scholarship. That sounds great. And if it's paired with other substantial financial aid with a cost of attendance around $60,000, that can be a very affordable school for the student and family to go to. But if it's $23,000 scholarship, it may be Pell and FSCOG. So in total gift aid, $30,000. There's a gap between 30 and 60 there of another $30,000. If you borrow that entire amount to fill that gap, that's $120,000 over the course of 4 years. For some students, that is a reasonable amount of money for them to borrow for their 4-year degree. Say you're going into a STEM field or into business or into healthcare, and your projected salary at graduation is somewhere between 60 to 80,000 roughly, depending on the field. $120,000 in student loan debt might not seem unreasonable for you. So you decide to make that commitment to that institution and you think you'll cover it, you'll figure it out how to make it work based on the income that you want to earn at graduation or that you plan to earn at graduation. For other students and families, hearing that number is completely off-putting, and that will eliminate this institution as a part of where you're going to go in the fall. So I want you to pay attention as you receive these financial aid award letters. One, because some colleges are really great about highlighting what your net cost is. So factoring out any grants, scholarships, loans, or work study that you provided, what does it cost to you out of your pocket? And others don't necessarily do the best job of highlighting that. I'm not saying that to talk negatively about an institution, but for me personally, I believe with the financial aid process, because we're dealing with real world dollars and real world impact to you as the student and to families, I think colleges need to be completely transparent about what the cost is going to be out of pocket to the student. Because even here in this example, it says your net cost is 24,500, but with loans of 5,500, I'd argue that your net cost is closer to that 30,000 because you're still borrowing funds to cover that gap, and you're gonna have to have planned for how to pay that back. Sometimes students lose track of that too. As you're reading through financial aid award letters, you may see the loans, but it might not register as something that you're borrowing. And then you see your net cost, and you're thinking, oh, I'll just borrow, and I'm only borrowing 24,500. But in the scenario, you're actually borrowing closer to 30,000. And it's easy to miss that if you're not doing the math from one financial aid offer to another. If you find yourself in a position where your net cost is something that you feel is unreasonable as a family, between when you receive your financial aid award letter and May 1st is a great time to reach back out to the college and see if there's any additional aid that the student is qualified for. This is one area where I have seen if you didn't apply by the priority financial aid deadline, sometimes this is where that comes home in this process. Because the college may say our priority deadline was March 1st, but you submitted your FAFSA March 5th. Because of that, you missed the opportunity to get this scholarship that you otherwise would have received in this process. So sometimes that does happen. On the opposite end, or the opposite side of the spectrum, for any scholarship that you receive that's not a federal or state grant, I would ask the institution, is this a one-time award? Is it something that I'll receive every year that I enroll at your institution? Is it something that I have the opportunity through either earning a specific GPA or making X amount of progress towards my degree? Is it something I could potentially increase year over year? Is there a risk of the scholarship fund decreasing as I go through college? Because sometimes that does happen. Sometimes institutions will front load what they're able to offer a student to get them to commit. And then on the back end, the student ends up having to borrow more because the scholarship allocation is reduced in future years. You'll want to make sure before you make a decision that you understand everything that's being offered to you. If you have questions, very generally speaking, for any federal or state grant, those dollars are going to hold true over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. This always depends for federal funds on congressional appropriations. So these are decisions that Congress makes every year. And for state funds on appropriations that are decided by the General Assembly for every 2-year budget. But generally speaking, what you're awarded, you'll get year over year roughly the same, as long as your family's finances stay the same. But checking on the individual scholarships that a college is offering you is a great opportunity for you to check in. One, to make sure you can really afford what you're budgeting out. And also, if there are avenues to pursue as a student at the institution to get access to additional aid in future years, you want to have a plan for how you're going to do that going into your freshman year. Then realizing sophomore or junior year that you could have done a little bit more, or maybe instead of a 3.0 your freshman year, you needed to get a 3.2 to get that upperclassman scholarship that you otherwise were in a position to receive. So as you're working through this process, make sure, again, you're asking questions about every line item. If you're not sure what something means, colleges have admissions officers and financial aid officers on staff to help you answer questions. I would start with your college and career counselor. They're a great resource that you have right at your high school. If you're not sure, if you need their assistance to help make a phone call because you as a student just aren't comfortable making a phone call, you can ask them to help you make that call. For parents, if you have questions, I would also encourage you to check in with your student's college career counselor first. You can also come to me. I'm happy to help you navigate this process. But the key that I want to emphasize here is that for your financial aid offer, I want the dollars and cents to make sense. I want you to understand what your net cost will be once the student decides to go this route, so that they can make an informed decision about what their debt load's going to be at graduation. Maybe they need to plan to work a part-time job as they go through undergrad to help reduce some of the borrowing that they'll do. Or maybe they borrow during the academic year and they plan to work full-time during the summer to help lower some of those loan balances that they borrowed during the year, or save for future years so they can borrow less for future years. Have a conversation with the family, as a family, about what is a responsible amount of money to borrow. For some families, any dollar amount can feel like too much to borrow in this process. So I want you, as students, one, talk to your parents about this, because parents, whether or not you went to college, this is where your life experience is absolutely invaluable to your son or daughter. Because for most students, all these numbers on the screen in front of us are imaginary. Whether it's 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, $30,000 of borrowing they have to do over the course of 4 years. They've never dealt with numbers like this, and they don't understand the long-term impacts of what borrowing money at this amount does. And parents, you do. Whether you have a car note, mortgage, if you're paying rent, you understand what it's like to budget X amount of dollars over the course of month by month, year by year, to pay for your expenses. You can help your kids understand what the impact is of borrowing X amount of dollars and what that looks like over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years or more. So talk about this. I've already mentioned the first part, my advice, part two. But remember that loans must be repaid. It can be very easy to fall into the trap of believing the idea that, because it was talked about a lot, especially under the Biden administration, about student loan forgiveness. Even at the rate that student loan forgiveness was processed through programs like public service loan forgiveness, the actual amount of student loans that are borrowed that are discharged through forgiveness is really low. So when it comes to borrowing money to help you pay for your education, that is absolutely a reasonable way to help you figure out how to pay for college. But especially for the students that are listening to this presentation, I want to be very clear that you need to have a plan for how you're going to pay that back. And so set a limit for yourself. There's still some time to apply for scholarships, as your college career counselor is begging you to apply for scholarships. It's not too late to submit some scholarship applications to help save. But you can save money. Everything that is budgeted for you as a part of the financial aid process, you do not have to spend up to that dollar amount. Maybe instead of looking for a single dorm room at the college that you're enrolling in, maybe you got to be okay with having a roommate so you can save on housing expenses. Maybe you need to have two roommates, so living in a triple, and that'll help you save a little bit of money on your housing plan. You can save money in this process. You don't have to spend up to your budget. You can work and get a part-time job if you haven't had one before. I do hesitate with freshmen with part-time work because sometimes that can take away from academic performance and can stretch out what your academic career looks like in college. So instead of 4 years, maybe it becomes 5 or 6 years because you're trying to work and balance that out. But where you do have to work, make sure you keep that in balance. Make sure for work study, the reason that it works in this process is because those jobs know that the student is both a worker and a student at the same time, and they generally want you to be successful and graduate on time in those work study positions. So I recommend that if you have work study as a part of your financial aid package, you take advantage of that opportunity to help you pay for your expenses. And then last but not least, students, you can cut expenses. Maybe you overspend your fall semester or your freshman year because you went out to eat with your friends every day. As a fall semester, your freshman year, you didn't touch your meal plan, so you wasted money on your meal plan, and then you spent a lot of money eating out. So spring semester, maybe make that a much less frequent thing that you do, and save some money in your budget, and try to set aside some money for future years. One thing I do want to encourage you to do, even if your college career counselor or the scholarship organization is talking to you like you're the scholarship winner, don't count on scholarships until you actually receive them. It can be very tempting if you feel like if you know, out of 300 students in your senior class for one senior scholarship. If there were only 30 applications and you have the highest GPA, because sometimes stuff like that gets out. You may think, oh, I've got that scholarship already, and you put that on your list. Don't count your chickens before they hatch in this process. Wait until the scholarship is actually awarded to you, so that you know that there's money you can count on to help you pay for your educational expenses. And then last but not least, something that I talked about a little bit earlier in this presentation, consider appealing your offer. For public schools, this doesn't work as often as it might for private schools, and I'll explain why in a moment. But even for a public institution like University of Virginia, William & Mary, Virginia Tech, you can absolutely reach out to admissions and financial aid and say, hey, we're hoping to come to send our student to you in the fall. We're just worried about this cost of attendance and the financial aid that's offered. Is there any additional aid that we might be eligible to receive? And that can make a big difference in our decision. You can do that once you receive a financial aid offer. It doesn't work as frequently for public institutions, usually because they tend to award what they can in the process. Whereas for private institutions, because maybe they have a more robust financial aid budget, they're able to award more towards demonstrated interest possibly in this process. So you calling and saying, hey, I wanted to see if there's any additional aid I could be awarded. Sometimes those private institutions hold back funds to be able to do that, to encourage students to accept their offer of admission, whereas public institutions tend not to do that. But it never hurts to ask. Don't be disappointed or get angry if you're told no. That just means you got to reassess and decide if an institution really is the best choice for the student. But it never hurts to appeal, especially if your family's finances have changed for the worse between the tax year, so 2023 tax year that was incorporated as part of the FAFSA or the VESA, and the reality that we're in right now in the spring of 2025. Maybe your parent works for a federal agency and their job was cut, or they recently were notified that they're going to lose their job in the next 30 to 60 days. Some colleges won't let you formally work through the appeal process until the job loss happens. So sometimes you have to wait until that job loss happens to file the appeal to be able to document that. But if something like that has happened within your household, it is absolutely worth the time that it takes to appeal what financial aid was offered to you, because maybe your parent is going to be out of work for 3 months, 6 months, a year. We don't know what the reality will be when that happens, but if that has happened within your household, the financial aid process up to this point wouldn't have caught that as a part of this review. So appeal that. If there was a large medical expense, either maybe your parents had another child, or maybe there was a major surgery that was really unexpected and came out of nowhere. Maybe a parent moved in and there's additional medical expenses that parents have you've started taking care of, or students your parents have taken care of, your grandparent for, that weren't captured as a part of the financial aid process. There are different types of appeals based on the circumstances I just described. So either a change in income, medical expenses, and every college labels these appeals a little bit differently. So when you're going through this process of trying to figure out how to file an appeal, one of the things that does frustrate students and families is that there's not one uniform piece of paper to fill out. Sometimes institutions will have 2 or 3 different forms you could fill out depending on the circumstance, and they may label it one thing at one institution and another thing at another institution. So this process can take some time to work through. So if you're in a situation where you know already that you're going to need to appeal the decision in terms of the financial aid offer, gather your paperwork, whether it's medical expenses, bills that you've had to take on, a change in either a reduction in income, especially from a salary position, or a loss of a job. Have that documentation ready, and so that you can submit that as a part of the appeal process as you work through it. Lastly, one of the reasons I said earlier that I hope the student hasn't already decided where they're gonna go is because I want you all to be in a position where you're able to accurately compare financial aid offers, so you can see what your net cost is after financial aid. In the scenario on the screen in front of us, awesome private university is actually more affordable for this student than the great state university, because their net cost is $1,000 lower even though the total cost of attendance is double at Austin Private University than Great State. This is why I mentioned, you want to wait for the financial aid process to work itself through all the way. Wait until you receive that financial aid award letter and see what the costs are across the board and compare from one institution to another. See what institution A is offering, institution B is offering, institution C, D, and so on, and what makes the most sense financially. Sometimes students will go into this process with a clear top choice institution, and it may have been their top choice institution since they were in the 4th grade. But financial aid sometimes presents a different reality. And sometimes top choice school since 4th grade becomes really challenging to remain in that position because maybe second choice or third choice is offering a lot more in terms of financial aid. Sometimes parents, students will make the decision they still want to go to top choice institution, even if it's going to cost more. Students don't make that decision without talking to your parents, especially if the net cost is drastically different from one institution to another. Hopefully all the institutions that you've applied to have your major. But maybe when we were talking about those graduation and student loan default rates earlier, maybe institution A that costs a little bit more, maybe $2,000 more a year, maybe their graduation rate from their program is 95%. And none of their graduates default on their student loans. Whereas institution B, even though it costs $2,000 less a year, maybe their graduation rate is 80% and 20% of their grads default on their student loans. Top choice might still be the top choice when you're comparing all those data points, or it might not be. I want you all as families to be having conversations to look at the grants and scholarships that are offered because those are free dollars that you don't have to worry about paying back. You could see differences in work study funds from one institution to another. For any federal grants the student receives, Pell would remain the same across every financial aid award letter that you receive. So it should be the same number from one institution to another. But there are federal funds that may be different from one institution to another. So that does happen. So it's not always comparing line item by line item, but in terms of total category, what are the total grants and scholarships that are being offered to you? What is your net cost after those grants and scholarships? I look at that first and then consider what is the net cost after student loans and work study. Because ultimately for a student in this position, they're looking at borrowing. The difference is $1,000. But for Great State University, maybe that institution can award $1,000 more in work study to match what the private institution is able to give them. So ask to see if there's an additional allocation that can be made, which would bring that net cost down to $12,000. Then you're comparing apples to apples at that point. Do you want to go to a public school or a private school? It doesn't cost you the same thing. So what are the opportunity costs from one institution to another at that point? If you have any questions, again, I would reach out to the college directly and ask for the financial aid award letter that you have questions about. But it's never too early to ask a question in this process. As you're comparing financial aid award letters, keep in the back of your mind, unless you were admitted early decision and you already committed. For early action regular decision, your deposits are due by May 1st. For students and families in the audience that used fee waivers for the SAT, ACT for your college applications, ask to see if there's a waiver for your tuition deposit. Sometimes there are tuition and housing deposits. They may be the same thing. They may be different from one institution to another. Sometimes these deposits are $200 to hold your spot in the incoming class. Sometimes it's $1,000. For some families, $200 is affordable and it's something that you can manage. For other families, $200 might not be affordable on a month-by-month basis. So ask for a tuition waiver, tuition deposit waiver, or deposit waiver, or housing deposit waiver. Some colleges call it different things. It's essentially, though, it's a part of your bill that's due for the fall semester. So if you ask for a waiver, just know that you'll pay for that through the financial aid process overall, but have a plan for how you're going to pay that bill when it comes due in August before you send in your deposit. either paying the deposit or asking for a waiver that will secure your spot because your fall bill, excuse me, is due before your classes begin. And if you don't pay your bill, it can keep your student from either enrolling in classes for the fall, or it can get them dropped from classes. Payments not due over the course of it's not due by a certain point in the semester. Because at the end of the day, you want to choose the college that is the right fit for you and makes the most financial sense. Hopefully, every college that your son or daughter has been admitted to, or for the student that you've been admitted into, it makes sense for you from a major standpoint, and it makes sense from a location standpoint. This part of the process, we want to make sure it makes the most financial sense. I hope that your top choice school or major top choice school through this process, that you get all the financial aid you need to make it make sense. But if you don't and you need to go with option B, maybe option B becomes your top choice because they gave you the money that option A didn't. But that's okay. That happens as we work through this process of understanding what one institution is offering and another institution is offering from a financial aid standpoint. Don't take it as a slight. Colleges typically have limited financial aid budgets from what they can offer. There are a small handful of rare exceptions in this country, but for the most part, colleges meet between 70 and 80% of your total cost of attendance. So pay attention to your net price as you're comparing one financial aid award offer from another, and pay attention to the amount of money that the college is asking you to borrow. Because again, at the end of the day, it's up to the student to borrow the money. It's up to the student to spend up to the budgeted amount or over that budgeted amount the college includes in this part of the process. But got some time for questions. If you want to unmute or throw a question in the chat, I'm more than happy to answer questions at this point.
We have a couple of questions in the chat if you want to answer them. One of the questions is, to what type of college counselor do we need to reach out to?
Yeah. And when I said college career counselor, your counselor at your high school. So every Prince William County high school has a great staff member that's right there on site that can help you navigate this part of the process. And if they have any questions, they already know that they can reach out to me directly, and we'll get you connected and get the answers out to you.
Please reach out to your college and career counselor at your school. Another question that came in, do you have to be committed before you get the awards letter? My son is accepted but not committed. We have not heard from any college about financial aid packet, and we submitted way before March 1 deadline. Should I be concerned?
Great question. I understand why you feel in the dark, but know that this is a normal part of the college admissions calendar. Essentially, your son or daughter may have gotten all their college applications in by November 1st. So they either applied early decision, early action, everything. And you may have gotten all your decisions back before January 1st. So it feels like a long time to wait, but it is absolutely normal to not have anything yet in the financial aid process. But I would be surprised if you're in the same scenario 2 weeks from now. It would be, I have seen it where financial aid award letters don't come until April, but if you applied by that priority deadline that the institution had out there, you'll get your financial aid award letter sometime in March, and that'll give you at least those 30 days between the end of March and May 1st to decide what makes the most sense. But it's not uncommon. You shouldn't be worried. I would encourage the student to regularly check the portal that they were given for that institution, because sometimes you won't receive financial aid information because the student is missing some documentation, and the college will send messages through that portal to ask for that. And if the student's not checking their email or that portal regularly, you could miss that. So that's the only thing I would advise, is that you help the student just check those portals to make sure they're not missing anything. But it's not uncommon to not have anything at this point.
All right, those are the only two questions that we had in the chat. Any additional question? I'll give you a minute or two, just if you have any additional questions.
While we wait, we do want to let you know that in the chat is a link to the Prince William County Scholarship Survey. Every year, Prince William County Public Schools collects information about scholarship offers for our senior class, which informs our PWCS strategic plan. We want to celebrate your efforts, your offers, and your future ahead. So if you choose to fill this out, you will have an opportunity to also share if you would like to be celebrated and recognized at your school's senior awards ceremony. So again, this is a survey opportunity for students and families to fill out to share any scholarship offers, regardless of if you plan to accept them or not. And that link is in the chat, and schools will be sharing that more directly with the students and families as well.
All right, I didn't see any other questions, so thank you so much, Jason, for joining us. As always, it's always a pleasure to have you on here.
Of course, thank you. And I just wanted to share that my
Go ahead.
last slide was the oh, you have it already. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's just my contact information. So students and families, if you have the need to reach out to me, email works great. More than happy to help you answer any questions you have in this process.
Just as a reminder, this session was recorded, so I'll make sure you have the recording. I'll make sure to include Jason's contact information should you need it. And I'll also include the scholarship survey for you families if you would choose to fill it out and want to have your child recognized for the award ceremony. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. We have placed the survey for this session in the chat. We ask that you please just take a couple of minutes to fill that out. Let us know how we're doing and any type of programming that you want to see in the future. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.